Also, as a reminder, everyone, if you approach a podium, we need your name and address. Okay.
Yeah, we may have to, because you did a PDF, we may have to do kind of a movement from one page to the next. Go ahead, Jeff.
On the first slide is that top one.
Is it the top one?
So on the fifth page.
Try that.
Turn on one, let's go page up.
Keep going. No, you can't get to the small one.
Well,
Go ahead.
go ahead and start it, and we'll see how this goes. So, my name is Jed Clausen. I'm with Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas. We're the civil engineers and surveyors for the project. With me tonight is Mr. Greg Creed. Greg is the Creed Bones and owner of Aspen Creek LLC. He's the developer of the project.
Fred, you might want to put the microphone up there.
I know it's hard to see with that top image there. You can look at the next image down, and I can just explain to you what that is. This next image down here is a rendering of our overall plan for the property. This is kind of the eastern area, or what was the really developed area of the original Aspen Creek development. That was primarily a single family development, mostly developed out of single family, and then we had duplexes that were developed in the southeast corner, which would be to northwest. Western. Is it possible to have a pointer or we can show what the existing duplexes?
Show them what the existing duplexes
Right there. So this property, it's colored here, is 33 acres, and never been developed. It was, from what I can tell, looking back at the staff reports, was originally started to be zoned back in the mid-90s. Was last zoned back in 2001, and was zoned, the northern part was zoned single family, so on R1, and that's what we're proposing to continue with and finish up tonight. The southern part was zoned in R2, and proposed to be a duplex type development, matching what was built already just to the west of it there. If you want to go to the next page down, what you see here was the previously approved plan for the northern part, or the single family. There were 57 lots, and best we can tell, this was something that was provided to us from the selling broker and the sellers, that there was 57 lots of single family residential that was proposed on this. You can see the street orientation and the street grid layout, and that's something that, this original Aspen Creek was developed out with a certain layout, a certain network of streets, and we're really adhering to that with our layouts. You see a north-south street here on the eastern side with lots backing off to the east. You'll see a connection. I'm sorry, the screen keeps going blank here for a few minutes, but cul-de-sac and then a street connection to the west. And if you can visually remember that, and go, now we'll go to the next slide. Scroll. And you can tell there, in fact, let's just go to the color drawing just to the south there. I took and enlarged that first image that you saw that shows the lots. This is going to be 56 lots, so one less than before, and pretty much the same identical street pattern. That was, been a record for about a decade and a half to almost 2 decades. One thing that's a little different, and this is through a lot of conversations with staff, and Greg and I have been talking to staff since really last fall. And when Greg was first looking at this property, to understand, what was approved here and, how we go about getting approvals and such. One thing that was brought up from your professional staff and engineering group was the desire to have a possible street connection to the east. And you see that in the southeast corner there, right? And we've got a cursor on it right now. So that's so that possibly when the property to the east develops some more, we set that up such that if that street was ever extended, lots to the north of that future street could be single family as well. Not saying that that's what it's going to be, but at least try to plan ahead a little bit for the future. Okay. So that's the northern part of the single family part of the project. And by the way, one of the rezoning requests that's one of your 5 items tonight is to kind of clean up a little bit of leftover R2 zoning that doesn't fit correctly within that very southeast lot that the cursor is on right now. So it's kind of a technical correction fix that, because right now it's R2 zoning. That lot is halfway split between R2 and R1. We just want to fix it and make it R1. And then the next screen, this is the preliminary plat, or the final plat that was, as we understood, previously approved for the duplex lots. This would be the southern portion of the property. And you can tell that that north-south street then just continues to the south, gets down to an east-west street there, where that connects on to the east-west street that then heads on out to the west. And one thing you'll notice on this is there was no extension of that east-west street farther off to the east. There was just like a tract shown there. So really no foresight at that time of how possibly the future road network system could possibly develop. And that's something that, as we started talking to staff, that was important to the engineering department. As you know, and Phelps Engineering was part of this, the Plaza South development, which is to the south and west of this, it's just getting finished up now with construction. That's at 188 and Gardner Road there. That road was just put in, and that road may eventually come along the southern side of this property and skirt along I-35 and then somehow eventually tie back into the north and east. We don't know exactly how, but what our plat does that we're proposing today gives that flexibility to future planning commission action that you guys could approve a plan that all makes sense with the transportation connections and tie-ins here. So as you go to the south, or the next exhibit here, let's just go to the color image there. It's a little easier to see. You'll see that a couple of things. Generally, the street network is identical to what you saw in the previously approved plat. There is a street stub connection off to the east that we're proposing to build there, and that is part of it. We're also in talking with your city engineering department, recognize the need for potentially some traffic calming along that southern east-west street. So we're introducing a median island in there to help slow down traffic. It's something that we find is very effective in residential neighborhoods. But, we can't really do anything about the street to the west. It's already built. It's a long section of street. into some future road. But what we can do is try to provide some traffic calming features within the design of this that can help with speeds along that street. The other thing I think I'd like to point out is previous layout really didn't have any plan for the large open space tract of land to the south of those south lots. That's where some overhead power lines are running. And if you look at that prior plan, it just didn't even include it in the plat. And our development, we would include that in the plat, we'd be paying our excise tax on it. And we're proposing to try to activate it by putting in a trail system, a circular trail throughout there, as well as activated with some frisbee golf stations and a hammock garden in there. Now we're open to other ideas as well, but we felt it was important to try to provide some amenities for the residents, both in our subdivision as well as the Aspen Creek that's out there. A couple notes. I believe we meet all of our stormwater and traffic requirements as set forth by the engineering department. I did want to, if we could, just scroll down a few more slides. These are all the technical documents for the preliminary development plan showing grading and utility layouts. If you could stop at this slide right here, you'll see in the blue lines, and there's some green on there too. These are all the utilities that we installed with the new street network system. There's a large storm sewer system that will be constructed along the western side of the property in a north-south orientation. That picks up a lot of drainage that's over there on that western side of this property and drainage that comes off of the existing development, which I think some of the neighbors on the western side of us or eastern side of the existing Aspen Creek will benefit from, because right now it just empties into a ditch and kind of meanders through there. And really, this last phase of development kind of fixes some drainage problems that we see as the indicators for that. There is an existing sanitary sewer already out there that was really set up in anticipation of this last phase. It runs north and south along that very eastern north-south street. If you put that cursor on that part, up on the right side of that, or eastern side of that street, there's a sanitary sewer that's already over there that's already set up. So a lot of the decisions that have been made as far as how this subdivision lays out and what the street network looks like is obviously set forth in the original preliminary plans and the original zoning. And this is really to finish off the last phase of this development. Which I do want to make a couple of comments about is you see a lot of different drawings of north, east, southeast. And Greg's intention here is to construct this all as one project. That's the way we see it, and we would like to finish it out as one overall project with your last couple of slides I want to show, maybe one of the, of course, landscape is always an important part of what we strive to do in any development. There's a stipulation in the packet tonight about improving the landscape buffer along the north side, which we agreed to do with that. So those kinds of final details come back before you in the final plan application. And then one more screen, please. If that image in the middle there is intended to be kind of a blow up of, again, that certain area where we'd like to do a trail system. So I think one of the stipulations in there is to construct that trail at 8 foot wide, and we agree with that stipulation. As well. We want to keep going south, up, down, into this, and then we provide a blow-up detail all landscape that meets the city ordinance requirements. Keep going. And then I guess I'll, just to keep things simple tonight, I'll close with just a few images of proposed duplex units. These are units that Greg has built in Olathe in an infill area as well. They're very popular with residents there. They've got that front porch, stone wainscot, stucco siding, heavy grade timberline roof. And one of the comments
But what I wanted to point out to you is a lot of it is just trying to make, you know, what's already laid out here for a duplex type development to fit within the new ordinances or newer ordinances since the original subdivision had been laid out. So a lot of those have to do with that. There are no waivers for the single family, just on the duplex side of the development. With that, Greg and I will stand for any questions. We are agreeable to all stipulations with all 5 cases, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any commissioners that have any questions for him right now? No, it doesn't look like we have any at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, City.
As we make the switch, I think we're figuring out the technical problem, so hopefully the sound will get better and everything like that, so.
My computer's not working.
Your computer's not up?
No.
Okay.
I turned it on and turned it back on.
There's one down here that works.
Yeah.
This one may be working.
Yeah, we want to switch.
Okay.
Switch you over.
We've just been sharing.
It was really sharing.
Yeah.
This one, so.
It's live.
Yeah.
There you go.
I can breathe. Good evening, Commissioners. As Dave mentioned earlier, we're going to try to run through all these applications. The first 2 items are the Meadows of Aspen Creek. It's the zoning and the preliminary development plan. Again, that's items 1A and 1B. Items 1C is the actual preliminary plat for the Meadows. Items 1D are Aspen Creek 5 rezoning, that little sliver that Judd had mentioned earlier for the single family. And then item 1E will be the preliminary plat for the single family as well. Again, this is the overall kind of layout, gives you an idea of the general location of how this relates to 183rd and Gardner Road, and also its close proximity to I-35. Overall, both Aspen Creek 5 and the Meadows cover a total of 33.59 acres and consist of a total of 89 lots and 1 tract. There are 33 duplex lots and 66 single-family dwelling units. 33 duplex lots for 66 dwelling units within the Meadows, and 56 single-family lots within the proposed Aspen Creek 5. Aspen Creek, project overview. Again, the total development will consist of a mix of housing types: detached suburban, compact duplex, 89 lots overall. Has an open space component with walking trail, frisbee golf, and a hammock station. Historically, this property was annexed into the city back in 1996 as part of a larger 158-acre site, which is basically a quarter section. It was rezoned from to R1, single family, in June of 1996. And then the south section was rezoned to R2 back in 2001. And there have been no associated plans submitted with either of the zoning petitions at those times. This next slide shows you the I-35 and Gardner Road interchange sub area. And as you can see, well, I wish I had a pointer. Where Dave is pointing with the cursor right now is kind of the site location. As you can see, the northern portion, which is proposed to go single family, is low density residential. And the orange part is medium density residential below. Yeah, keep on looking back because this keeps going down on me. Staff analysis of the rezoning. Aspen Creek neighborhood is currently a mix of single-family and duplex uses in a traditional suburban pattern. The development proposes to utilize a compatible zoning district to the adjacent properties and provides a buffer to the commercial development to the east and south. The property is suited for the uses to which it has been restricted. The change in zoning from R2 to RP4 has minimal impact to the neighborhood. The change in zoning from R2 to R1 has no negative impact to the neighborhood and aligns with the proposed plat lines. Property has remained undeveloped for about 19 years. Again, the property has long remained undeveloped and the developer is trying to bring additional workforce housing to the city. As mentioned earlier, the proposed change is consistent with the future land use map designation per the applicable sub-area and supports various housing goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. The proposed development provides for the extension of utilities and roadways. It also provides for a walkable environment via the continuation of the sidewalk network, which connects to the Gardner Road Trail. The development provides an additional housing option and improves the ability to live close to their jobs. The staff analysis of the Meadows of Aspen Creek preliminary development plan plat. This infill development has accomplished through the layout a compatible blend of development patterns with the existing neighborhood, and was recommended to utilize the same suburban frontage type with sidewalks on both sides of the street in order to be consistent with both the duplexes and the single-family houses that are existing there today. Again, the applicant has provided internal pedestrian connections, open spaces, and to the public realm that encourages outdoor activities. The flexibility and standards allow for the project to meet and exceed the intent of the statements of the base zoning by supporting the residential development variety for the city through the proposed building types, open spaces, and pedestrian network. This plan promotes generally accepted and sound planning and urban design principles, and the staff finds this plan meets all the review criteria for a rezoning map amendment. The applicant has requested 4 deviations as part of the preliminary development plan. And I'll just read through those, and then we could, if you need to discuss those, you can do that later. The first deviation request is from Chapter 1704, Subdivision Standards, Section 1704.010, Street Networks and Street Designs. Standard is for 5-foot sidewalks on one side. The proposed deviation from the applicant is 4-foot sidewalks on both sides. 186th Street through the proposed development is a continuation of existing 186th Street from the portions of Aspen Creek previously developed. The sidewalks along 186th Street in the existing development are 4 foot wide. The applicant is requesting that the proposed sidewalks along 186th Street be continued at 4 foot wide along that street, only to be consistent with the remainder of the street within existing Aspen Creek development. And the staff agrees with the applicant's statements, and we usually support that when we have a infill housing development that has those old 4 foot wide sidewalks. Second deviation request is from Chapter 1707, Building Standards. Section 1707.040, Specific Building Type Standards, Duplex Compact. The frontage type that are required by the code are neighborhood yard, terraced, limited, courtyard limited. The proposed from the applicant is they'd like to go to a suburban yard frontage type. And again, this request is coming to align with the existing neighborhoods to both the east on the duplex. The phase of the Meadows of Aspen Creek 2 is the last phase of the development. The existing development was built to standards consistent with suburban yard frontage types. The applicant is requesting that the proposed frontage type be allowed with suburban yard. and staff would agree with that as well. Third request is 1707 building standards, section 1707.050 frontage design, suburban yard. The standard is access width limits 30%, 24 max per access point applicable to the area within the right of way. And the proposed is they are requesting 87% of frontage in driveway width. Duplexes, the applicant's comment was the duplexes in the development each have a double car garage and driveway to allow for off-street parking. The double car garage requires a wider driveway than a single car garage. Thus, more width per lot frontage is needed for the driveway. A double car garage is more valuable to the residents and provides for a higher value residential project than a duplex with single car garages. To reduce the driveway width will result in a loss of off-street parking and reduction from a double car garage to a single, both of which are not desirable to the developer. The residents of the community as a whole, these driveways are also consistent with the existing development and the widths that have currently been built. However, the driveways proposed with the new development will add in a green space in between the driveways to allow for landscaping and break up the driveway width in the middle of the houses, which will be more aesthetic in appearance from the street. Staff comments on this is the deviation request is consistent with the development patterns of the duplex development adjacent to this proposed site. At the time the adjacent subdivision was developed, there wasn't an access width limit for duplexes. In keeping with the theme of continuous neighborhood development, it would stand that this is a reasonable request. Increasing the access also helps keep parked vehicles off the street, and the staff supports this request. And the last deviation. And the standard is for the building design standards again, section 1707.050, frontage design, suburban yard. A design performance standards allocation of space shall be 0 to 40% hardscape with the remainder either landscape or turf, and the proposed is 75%. Applicant's response, the duplexes in the development each have a double car garage and driveway to allow for off-street parking. The double car garage requires a wider driveway than a single car garage, thus more width per lot frontage is needed for the driveway. A double car garage is more valuable to the residents, provides for higher value residential project than a duplex with a single car garage. To reduce the driveway width would result in a loss of off-street parking and reduction from double car garage to single, both of which are not desirable to the developer, the residents, or the community as a whole. These driveways are also consistent with the existing development and the widths that have currently been built. However, the driveways proposed with the new development will add a green space in between, just like as previously discussed. And the staff comment on this is, the intent of the standard is to create a human scale relationship of buildings to the street, provide opportunities for subtle variations in design on the streetscape, and help create compatible relationships between buildings of different size. Staff acknowledges the difficulty in developing a duplex development that provides a two-car garage. Staff also acknowledges the difficult task of meeting the intent of the code while also trying to design a cohesive development with that of the adjacent subdivision, especially when the development includes a cul-de-sac. Staff supports this deviation request, but would like to see some design embellishments on the housing units, such as, but not limited to, windowed garage doors, enhanced landscaping, or other front facade design elements. The staff will work with the developer on these design details for incorporation and consideration with the final development plan application. Staff findings that this plan is consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan, provides a mix of housing which can serve multiple age groups of the Gardner population. The development is consistent with the Gardner Land Development Code by proposing an innovative design, and the proposed development promotes site and building design, and mitigates potential impacts on adjacent property owners. That is it.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Bob at this time? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to interject for just a second. Before you get started with the public hearing, I'm going to walk up to the podium and check a wire up there.
Okay.
And then we can get started again. We have been in touch with IT as well as the city administrator's been contacting us too, so we're kind of been communicating back and forth. The one computer, we're not sure why it's down, but I think you're taken care of now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're getting there, and I apologize to everybody for the inconvenience of the technology. So give me a second just to get up here and see if we can get that one thing fixed. Go ahead. Or are you gonna wait a second?
All right, at this time, we will open the public hearing. I do have a speaker sign-in list, and again, remind anybody that comes to the podium that it's 3 minutes. I can give an extension if needed. And then you give your name and your address, and then you're speaking towards the commissioners, please. Thank you. Mr. Gregorczyk, I have your name on the sign-up. I assume that
I
was
just
the
saw
wrong
that.
list.
Sorry, Commissioner.
Got it.
Thank you, though.
Mr. Gary?
Yes.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, Chairman. I guess I have 3 minutes, so I guess I'll have to be quick and to the point. Little background, I know that Phelps Engineering was up here speaking a little bit ago. I was actually the Parks and Recreation Director when this was actually platted for the first time in 2017. We highlighted several different issues. That had to do with Roush Coleman, who was looking to do the land in Plum Creek and also Aspen Creek at the same time. Part of that was we had issues with the park space, which you're seeing right now. This is basically almost the same plat. I have all this information still, so I know I met with David and Bob about this and told them if I found anything, I would provide it. So I can do that for anybody here. Part of what happened with that was we wanted the park out from underneath the power lines. And looking where everything is zoned right now, it's going to be surrounded by C3. And your future land use, C3, community commercial, and then you're even showing 186th Street even being potentially connected on page 3 of your agenda, connected to what would be an outer road. And so to me, you're basically squeezing this park, this park that doesn't meet land development code because the park master plan is part of the land development code. It's being squeezed in there, which to me is unsafe. We're not gonna be able to fly a kite. It's gonna be loud. There were a lot of different reasons for that. And so when we worked with Roush Coleman, they were concerned about the number of lots they were going to lose. They were gonna lose 6 lots in accordance with that. And so what happened is they were gonna do both. And so back then we were like, okay, well, there's already service areas in Plum Creek. They have Veterans Park, they have their HOA park, they also have Trail Ridge, not too far away. So what we'll do is we'll trade out 6 lots there in order to get a service area, because if you look at the park master plan, everything south of 183rd, and essentially this property in and of itself has 2 converging circles which have no service area for parks. There are no parks south of 183rd Street. So what happened was Roush Coleman decided to only move forward with Plum Creek, and they didn't move forward with Aspen Creek. So as a result, Plum Creek, and I have emails, I have all this information that I kept because there was a whole discussion about it where, and I even wrote this as a concern, I was like, you know, I understand, but taking the extra lots on Plum Creek as a trade-off to Aspen, when they're not providing the lots, they seem to be fine with giving us an Aspen Creek. So if they don't go with Aspen Creek as well, then a future developer, if they don't move forward with Aspen, will lose out on lots Roush Coleman gained by leveraging a subdivision they aren't even going to develop. That's what I wrote on July 5th of 2017 to the Community Development Department. And so here we are today with that situation. So you have a developer that wants to develop it, and they're wanting to put a park in essentially a buffer zone. And if you look at the land development code 17.04.020 and the location criteria in open space and civic space systems, and it was determined back in 2017 that says that open space requirement is in addition to any landscape setback, buffer, or frontage type requirement. In addition. And so what it seems to me is that we're going to use this park as a buffer to a C3 regional commercial development. And so I think that's a tough place to put a park. I think it's tough to put it under power lines. It's going to be next to some not so great retention ponds that are even to the west. I know citizens in Aspen Creek already have an issue with that. And then on top of it, I'm looking at all this commercial zoning and this future planning, and I'm sitting here wondering where are the park impact fees going? So if you're going to put in all this commercial development, where are those park impact fees being invested? In Trails and Symphony Farms and the Gardner Greenway? Where is it going? And to me, this is where you know what potentially park impact fees you're going to gain back from that in order to reinvest back into the area that actually needs park and open space. If you look at some of these open space and civic space requirements under location criteria, it says priority should be given to areas that provide the most visible impact and to locations that provide relationships to open and civic space systems on adjacent property and future development sites. Formal open space shall be centered in areas that will have the greatest population density, activity, or develop intensity in order to provide the greatest pedestrian accessibility. I mean, you're talking about waiving a compacted area from 4-foot sidewalk, 5 foot, which is the standard, and now it's exceptions kind of becoming the rule. Same thing happened in Plum Creek. It went back down to 4 feet in a place where you need more access. And so the other concern, again, I'm bringing up the Roush Coleman thing is because Roush Coleman actually replatted this to change it to do away with the duplexes because they even recognized the concern of the traffic. And so they did that in order to reduce like 112 lots. I don't know, I have the information here. And this was actually from Phelps Engineering that relayed this to us.
Mr. Gary, your time's up, but I'll give you another couple minutes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Is considering eliminating the duplex units and developing single-family suburban houses on the R2 zone property. This would significantly reduce the number of trips generated by the duplex lots. The reduction would be 119 households to 86. And so you're going to have a lot of traffic. You're going to have people shortcutting from Canton all the way down to 186 over. And then if you look at, I appreciate what they're trying to do with connecting it, but we're going to leave a dead end for potentially future development. And according, again, to the future zoning, this is all going to be commercial. And so you really have this residential subdivision you're tucking in. We're going to use the last, what appears to be usable space of a buffer area and call it a park. And I don't agree with that. I think everybody should consider making this, if this is going to proceed, it needs to be all R1. I'm sure the kind folks behind me some of them are probably gonna express their concerns about family housing. And even with the buffer area that they're already dealing with behind them. The only other things I would mention before I run out of time is that also according to the Land Development Code, natural space and trail greenway are not eligible open space types for traditional neighborhoods. This is from the Land Development Code. And trail greenway, what was the other one? There are 6 types of open space for traditional neighborhoods. The eligible preferred types, park, green squares, or natural areas and trail greenways are listed as limited for traditional neighborhoods. The trail greenway type would be acceptable if it corresponds with the bike and pedestrian trail locations or environmental features plan, which this proposal, if it's just like Roush Coleman, does not. The only other tidbit I would put in there is that the city engineer at the time, I'm not even sure if he's still here or whoever, I think it was the city engineer, Mark Pottinger, also expressed concerns about the 40% hardscape and thought that would be hard pressed. And so that's another variance that you're having to consider tonight. So all I'm saying is this is going to be a compressed space. It's going to be tight. You're increasing traffic. And then we're going to encourage kids to cross the street to go behind multifamily housing, not far from I-35, surrounded by commercial property. And so I think you need to really consider how this is going to affect property values, how it's going to affect usability and quality of life. I appreciate the extra time.
Thank you, sir. Our next public speaker is Mr. Kramer.
Hello, Planning Commission. I'm reading this on behalf of myself.
Sorry, sir. If you
I'm
can give
Joey
your-
Kramer. I live at 18515 South Mulberry Court. I'm reading this on behalf from myself and my fiancee Nicole, which she has beautifully written this. Dear Planning Commission, I'm writing to express my deep concern regarding a possible pre-development in Aspen Creek. Gardner's a great city, and I moved here 17 years ago when I bought my townhome in the Meadows of Aspen Creek, and it is my primary residence. Gardner has all the small town charm but the big city access. I love Aspen Creek and Gardner in general. We have a great community, which is safe, clean, and while we also have a growing economy. But it's been brought to my attention that there's a possibility that our beloved community will be changing for the worse soon. If the pre-development plans are approved, we can expect an immediate and lasting decrease in the value of our community. And this is not a personal dig on you, Greg, but Prebe Homes is not known for the development of quality homes. We do not want the Prebe multi-homes in our Aspen Creek subdivision, and we are asking you to look beyond the city's short-term financial gain and put yourselves in the shoes of the residents who live here. We are deeply concerned about our family's quality of life, and we are very against the development of adding low-income 4 to 6 plexes in Aspen Creek off 186th. This will drag down our property values. The density of the project, jamming all the multifamily homes into a space, and the heavy traffic that will cut through the subdivision, if the city agrees to more multi-housing development, will have a lasting negative effect on our community. What we need is a more open and safe outdoor areas for parks and for our children to play. We would like to remind you that the city committed to having a usable park with park space in 2017. And we are hopeful that you will follow through on your commitment to the citizens of Gardner, and more specifically, Aspen Creek. We implore that you guys do the right thing. Follow the park master plan and fulfill your obligations to take care of the citizens of Gardner. As a refresher, natural open space such as trails, greenways, and parks should be located along prominent ridges, valleys, and view corridors in areas where other natural features such as significant vegetation and water features exist. They are not to be located under major power lines and proposed in the current development plan. We are already facing a number of issues in southern Gardner with the increased traffic from BNSF Intermodal, and now with the approval of a development of a quick trip truck stop. Please note, we are not against the development itself. In fact, we are for limited and well thought out development opportunities, one in which have long-lasting positive effects for the future Gardner's residents. The net here is that we are citizens for the health and economic development and growth of Gardner. In this case, passing a vote to develop numerous jam-packed multifamily homes in Aspen Creek and one without a usable park is just definitely not the answer. We need to increase community spaces for our youth to engage and to develop pro-social behaviors. I urge you to see this issue through the lens of the residents who do live here. The focus needs to be on 1, quality of life, 2, usable and safe parks and open spaces, 3, higher walkability score in the southern part of Gardner. Study after study has shown that by focusing on the 3 line items above, the result would be more economic benefits. Lasting economic benefits do not come from building low-quality multifamily homes. There is a way that we can work together and come to an agreeable solution. So I'm asking, will you guys work with us, the residents? Thank you in advance for your cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer.
Can we also get a copy of that? That way we can forward it on for the record to the city council as part of
Yes.
that packet. So you have another copy, is it okay? We have it. Okay, thank you, thank you.
All right, I believe Ms. Huffman?
Hello. I didn't prepare anything, but I really feel that I need to take the opportunity.
Ma'am, can you give your name and your address?
Gina Huffman at 29101 West 186th Street.
Thank you very much.
So I live right in the middle of what we're talking about. I'm about two houses down from where the duplexes start. And I can't even let my grandson play in the street or along the sidewalks. The traffic is so bad already. When I leave for work in the morning, it takes 5 minutes to make a left-hand turn at the end of 186th Street. So the thought of multifamily housing going in and routing down 186th Street really to me is incomprehensible in every way. Even adding single-family housing is concerning with the way it is now. And my backyard is the area that you're talking about for the park. I don't know if any of you have ever walked it back there, but it's a swamp. I have crawdads in my backyard. We have spent a fortune filtering water off our property and continue to do so. The light rains last week had 2 sub pumps going nonstop for 72 hours. So we're talking about that the storm drainage is adequate. Storm drainage is not adequate in that area by any means. So that's really just my concern is the traffic and the swamps and the multifamily housing, which typically the houses are going for close to $300,000. I don't know why you would put low-income housing at the end of a street like that. Doesn't make sense to me. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'm not sure on the last name, so Sampson?
Well, good evening, Commissioners. I'm gonna echo a whole lot of the words spoken by
Sir,
others.
Can I
Samson, 28999 West 185th.
and your full name?
Molo, Samson Molo.
Thank you.
So my major concern is gonna be traffic in that area, and as well as the value of our homes. We've lived at my house for 15, actually 16 years now. And I'm afraid the value and the equity that we've gained is going to go down the hill pretty quick. Traffic definitely is going to be an issue. With all the traffic from 186 and 183rd, not 183rd, but over there by Quick Trip, if that all goes through, there's going to be a whole lot of traffic that will affect our kids running around. Now, the proposed single-family homes, I would like to know, the square footage. Are they going to be bigger or smaller than what we have? And that would also help determine or make that decision on the single-family homes. But multi-family homes, I think is going to be a disaster. I don't know if it's going to be for rent or for sale. That will also make a difference. So, hope you make the right decision.
Thank you, sir. And then I'm not sure on the, Cody?
What's the last name?
I'm not sure if it's Grauberger or Grayberger. Okay.
There's another code. Good evening, Commission. I'll keep it short because a lot of the stuff's already, sorry,
Get your name
I should
and
say my
address.
name.
Yep.
Cody Grauberger at 18481 South Cherry Street.
Thank you.
A lot of what's been said already are concerns that have come to mind, so I won't mention them again, but I would affirm that a lot of the stuff that's already been said is something that I think is a valid concern. My chief concern, as I've already heard, is watershed. My property goes along that back portion that runs right up against the new development. When there's heavy rains, water flows. I mean, it's a dry bed river. When it's not raining, you can't tell, but you can see that the water has pushed shrubbery and things down. It gets very wet back there. I'm not the original property owner, but it's my understanding that the original developer remedied this by just coming and digging a trench to send the water on its way. But I'm concerned about, with this new development, that water will come onto my property and into the adjacent properties, my neighbors, and that ground is not sloped properly. Right now, it's just a field, and I think the farmer has sloped it towards all of our properties. So I'd be interested to know what remedies they're going to take to rectify that. I was reading through the notes. It looks like the stormwater plans and transportation impact study is not yet approved. So with that being said, I'd be interested, what the result of those studies were, and what they're going to do. And as a little side tidbit, I guess I'd be interested to know, how this develop is going to affect the traffic of the roads. Are they going to do what I see a lot of developers do, leave a lot of trash and debris on the ground, on the roads, things like that? I would like to feel good that they're going to be tidy as they're developing these fairly large intersections between the roads. That's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I don't have anybody else that signed up for the public hearing. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mauricio Leon, 28967 West 185th Street. And then again, just like my neighbor said, some of the things are already been covered, but I am the last house on 185th. And even though my neighbor Samson and we don't have anybody that has to go through that, I have experienced several issues to where folks, young kids, get back there and there are cops being called because they're smoking, they're doing drugs, they're doing different things. So one of my concerns is also the traffic and how it's going to connect to the other section, as well as the value of the homes. I think that's big. Then again, my big concern is that although we are already I'm the last house, there should not be any traffic there, and we still experience some of those things. I know my kids play in the back. In fact, the field next to me, I've been maintaining it for almost 8 years for that same reason. So we don't get young kids, teenagers, just go through that and do who knows what. So I would definitely ask you to make the right decisions as to whatever you choose to and whatever route we go, just to keep it safe for our families, keep the value up, and reconsider just putting low-income rentals back there for the purpose of of our families and our kids. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? Okay, seeing no one else, I'd accept the motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I have a motion by Commissioner Ford. Have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner McNear to close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Public hearing's closed. All right. I believe we have planning commission discussion, I believe, is that next, or the, oh, wait,
Yeah,
developed applicant. If you'd like to come up again, you can speak.
Yeah, so the applicant can come up and respond to questions that may have been asked during the public hearing, but also if you have questions or that you specifically wish for them to respond to, you can ask them questions also at the same time.
And you can just keep it on this one. This is fine. If you would just pull that up and maybe zoom out just a little bit. Thank you, commissioners, for hearing our case. A lot of good comments tonight. My name's Judd Clausen, Phelps Engineering again, for the record. First, I'd like to just respond to the parks part of it. You know, this is its own application. My client, looked at this property, saw a real value here to finish off a subdivision that had already been started. It's been sitting there for a long time. We want to add quality homes to finish out the rest of Aspen Creek here. The 7.4 acres that's shown at the bottom of your screen there, where we're building an 8-foot wide trail, putting in a Frisbee golf area and other amenities in there is not insignificant at all. I would like to even point out that Lenexa has a park called Buffalo Meadows Park in western Lenexa. It's got play fields, soccer fields, and it's all underneath a power line there. So to have a park underneath a power line is not unusual. And a lot of times that's what that can be used for. Because you obviously can't build there, but you can use it for recreational type purposes. There was a comment made about the sidewalks. We're just asking to make it consistent with what's already been built out there to match the subdivision. We're actually providing 4-foot sidewalks, 1 foot narrower than the 5-foot that's currently required by code, but it's on both sides of the street, whereas the code requires only 5 foot on one side. So we actually have more pedestrian connectivity options for our residents, both in the subdivision and those that live adjacent. There was comments about the stormwater, and specifically we know about the stormwater along the western side of our development there. Bob, if you could kind of point to the upper left part of the screen. There's stormwater that kind of runs all along that western side in an existing farm field ditch, and it may have meandered over time. You may recall the utility plan that I showed earlier in my presentation. It's a whole new storm sewer system with area inlets, underground storm pipes that are all designed to meet the city's stormwater ordinance requirements, picking up that drainage and conveying it to the south. So I think, if given the chance, I think the residents along there will see a considerable improvement in the way stormwater is handled, because they're right now backing up to an existing farm field that was just left in an undeveloped condition that obviously somebody was planning on coming right back in and building it, but it never happened. Traffic, I just want to comment on that. You saw the density where we're at with our units. It's very, very close to what was originally approved back in the mid-2000s. So as far as the number of trips that are generated off of our development, it's insignificant as compared to the original developed plan that this was already zoned for. In fact, I would like to offer and submit that we've provided more connectivity options. You see it on your screen there. There's 2 sections that can go off to the east so that when future land develops, this is part of a master plan of road connectivity that give options to the residents that live out there. You may have remembered from Bob's presentation, there was kind of a color plan that showed the major street network for Gardner. Well, 188th Street is shown on that plan, and so is the southern extension of Canton Street there along the eastern side of our property, that north-south street, along with 188th Street also on that plan. So what you're approving tonight for a street network is already in part of your city's approved master street plan. So it's just the next step in it. And lastly, there was a comment made about these being four or sixplexes, and that's not what's being proposed. These are duplex units, twins. These are high quality duplex units. In fact, Greg finished up a similar type project in western Lenexa on the west side of K7. It's called the Reserve Townhomes, west side of K7, north of 95th Street. And those homes, while those homes are fourplexes, these are just half of one of those. So it's the duplex portion of it. Those rent for upwards of $1,800 a month. The appraisal value on each of those units is around $250,000. So I would submit to you that these are not low budget, low cost housing options, but these are definitely market rate and will be an attraction for young professionals and those who want to live in Gardner and be part of the Gardner community. And I think that's what you guys are looking for as far as different housing options and that of being of high quality, which Greg does represent. So with that, I'll close for questions.
All right, well, the applicant's here. Does everyone have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Ford?
I don't have any questions.
Commissioner Vader?
One question. Why, I understand it's not the density, right, that's being increased, but it's the intensity. Why the R4 designation when R2 would suit the density?
And that's a great question. When you take a look at the code that's been developed since the mid-2000s, when the original part was built, you couldn't get the original part to still fit into the new R2 requirements under those types of standards that have been developed into UDO. We looked hard at the R2 requirements, and for this type of townhome product, it was a better fit to hit the R4 zoning. We have no need for what the intensity of R4 is, but the type of building type and yard type fit better with the R4 zoning. And after discussions with staff, felt that that was more appropriate than to ask for even more waivers in under an R2.
But the building type is not, how do I say this? Your zoning density or intensity, right? It's either the density of your population or the intensity of the use. So when I look at the density, it's R2. It has nothing to do with the type of housing, and I'll let staff weigh in as well. But when I look at the intensity of the R4 allows for retirement communities and congregate living. Is that a potential? I mean, when I drove the area several times to make sure I know where I'm at, and the proposed duplex units look exactly like what's there today.
And that's the intention. They're intended to look like what's there today.
Okay.
And you're approving a zoning with a plan. And so, when you look at, well, yeah, you could have these other uses in it. Well, if we decide tomorrow then to go and change it to a different use and build something different, we'd be right back in front of you asking for a change in the plan, because the plan goes with the zoning here. We could not get the duplex product that's successful in Lenexa, successful in Olathe, to fit inside this R2 zoning. It was a better fit actually under R4.
And that's where I'm going to have to look.
So I'm gonna try to clarify a couple things for you. I think I understand where your question is. One of the statements there that Mr. Clausen is correct about. Understand, with the rezoning, this is an RP zoning, so there's a plan that goes with it, and so everybody here understands that. The plan becomes the regulatory plan. So even though R4 by standalone would allow some of these other housing types, because there is a plan with this, they are only getting approved for what building type and what is shown in the plan. So they've come here with duplexes, and that's what the approved plan is that goes with the zoning. Duplexes is what they've been approved for, none of the other elements, okay? So just so we have that clear, if they wanted to change that, the market changes and they want to go back, they'd have to come back and do a revised preliminary plan and see if it fits the zoning. They may have to actually rezone depending on what they're trying to do at that point too, and that would trigger a whole new set of public hearings and things like that. So that's the plan side of it. When it comes to the intensity, the way the current code is written, the R2 zoning would only allow for lots of 10,000 square feet or larger. Okay, not the building type, but the lot size. So the largest or the smallest lot size that they could have for a duplex is 10,000 square feet under the R2. Okay, under the R4, they can go ahead. Under this RP4, they can get below that 10,000 square feet. And I don't remember your ranges exactly on those square footages. I think you're around
I remember
8,000.
lot size being an issue when we were doing the evaluation of the plan.
Right.
And
Because it fits under our current regulations, there's no comment to that, but it is what they're proposing, their lot sizes are smaller than the 10,000 square feet that would be allowed under R2. Now, understand, if they came in tomorrow with duplexes, 10,000 square foot lots and met all the zoning code that's there, that R2 zoning that's there, they could build their duplexes tomorrow with ever coming before you. If they had 10,000 square foot lots.
That's correct. Okay, I see where you're going with the square footage on that, and I didn't bring that part of the code with me tonight regarding the square foot. I was looking at it from an intensity perspective, and when you look at the code from the intensity perspective that's allotted in R4, it's congregate living and retirement communities. I didn't know if this was going to be a retirement community.
No, they would be limited to duplexes. The congregant living, all of those items, because it's not part of their preliminary plan before you, you approve the rezoning and you approve this preliminary plan, the only housing that they'll be able to provide is this duplex style that is shown here, and none of those other building types or other types of housing would be approved as part of that plan approval. That's the intent of when we do preliminary and final plans. It allows us to limit that actual use within a zoning district.
So we've had where a developer wanted to do an R1 to an R4 before, but did not come to us with the preliminary development plan. And as a commission, we refused the rezoning because without a preliminary development plan, the developer could come in and put stuff that we felt was not appropriate next to R1. But if they have a criminal development plan and they want to change it, we can refuse that, and they have to either not develop it or develop what we approved before. So they'll have to do what the duplexes if we approve that. They can't do any other part of the RP4.
Well, yeah,
unless we allow it.
Well, yeah, but you can. All I'm saying is, in the code, it's wrote you can build a duplex. That's fine, but you can turn it into congregate living, retirement home. I'm just saying that's what's allowed as far as the intensity of the use, and that was wanting to understand why the high intensity of the use when the duplex fits as far as the intensity of the use within R2. And I see your point, Dave, regarding the lot size. Yeah, it looks like there's a couple, there's several lots, we'll say, that are just, right at the 9,000 square foot.
They're like 8,000 to 9,000, somewhere in that range.
Just right there, slices away from the 10,000 square foot mark. So I get then from the lot size, but my question and concern is why does the R4 have anything to do with the intensity of the use?
Not as proposed, okay? And I want to be very cautious about this because, again, they could have, under R2, the way it's zoned today, could have come in with duplexes on lots of 10,000 or greater.
Correct.
They could have come in with an RP2 proposal, so RP adding the plan.
Right.
And they could have asked for deviations on every single lot that was going to be underneath 10,000 square So as we started looking at all the deviations that would potentially be asked for under the R2, it was felt that it was better for them to go to R4 and limit their use versus having a laundry list, if you will, of deviations from our RP2 district.
Okay, I think you
Does that-
cleared it, yeah,
Does
actually.
that help?
You cleared it up right there when you said limit the use, limit the intensity. You clarified that for me. As far as the rezoning piece, that answers my question on that one, Chairman. Thank you.
Any questions, Commissioner Hanson?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. It could be either for staff or for the developer, but it has to do with the deviation request and kind of listening to some of the concerns that have been expressed about green space and marketability, property values, appearance. I guess my question would be, A, on the deviation of the 4-foot versus the 5-foot sidewalks, when we know that green space is important, obviously property values are important. Why would we want to move back to, why would we be opposed to a 5-foot sidewalk, even though I know there's already a 4-foot sidewalk in place? If that kind of helps make some ground or some head ground towards making things a little bit better here. So that would be question number one. And then the other question is, I guess I need a little bit more information on the neighborhood versus the courtyard versus the suburban yard types. I mean, also if there are some opportunities there to make a little bit of headway towards increasing property values through some, not necessarily accepting the proposal, I would be curious to know a little bit more about that.
You going with the Aspen first?
Well, I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, I'll try to respond, because a couple of those are technical code kinds of questions there. I will say on the sidewalks themselves, again, under the current street type that would be applied here, they would only be required to put in a 5-foot sidewalk on one side of the street, okay? The reason that staff in the discussions felt that it was important to continue the 2 sidewalks on each side of the streets, because that is part of the development pattern adjacent. We also felt that converting from 4 to 5 feet at your connection points, you end up with sidewalks that don't really match very well. They have that overlap. So the feeling was continue the same pattern as is there. Now what the Planning Commission can do with this, obviously we have a recommendation in here embedded about it, but if you felt differently about those sidewalks, you could certainly in your recommendation add a stipulation, add a condition to change that however you saw fit as part of your recommendation. So that is something that's open to you and your judgment based on what you're hearing in the public hearing, but that would be something that the Planning Commission would have to make as part of their motion or to talk about further. So that's the sidewalk side. The yard types are kind of the same way. So it's similar to Commissioner Mader's commentary about the intensity types of things. Understand, we are trying to match a development pattern that is there already. These duplexes that exist to the west, as well as the single family, were developed prior to this iteration of the code. So they didn't have these same kind of yard standards, if you will. With us using the suburban standard roadway with a little modification by having sidewalks on both sides, it puts us in a little bit of a quandary because the courtyard yard type is really intended for a neighborhood street or an activity street, which is a much narrower width. So that kind of knocked that courtyard piece out of play when we were looking at it. Then when it came to the neighborhood and the suburban yard, one of the issues we had, again, if we used the neighborhood yard type, there would have been a ton of, I say ton, it's not a technical term, sorry. There would have been a number of deviations from those standards in the neighborhood side, because that's intended for a much smaller front yard and certain types of connections and things like that, which with the suburban street type weren't necessarily going to mesh unless we had a whole series of deviations on that. So again, staff in the discussion felt, given what we were trying to do to extend the development pattern that already exists there today, that having that suburban type or some modification there was simpler than having a laundry list of different deviations. So our current code is written with these layers of types, as you know, the streets, the yards, the building types, and they're meant in their theoretical form with a greenfield development, but we're not trying to put it into the context of a development pattern that exists. They work together very nicely, but when we're trying to unlock a combination of connecting to existing development plus where is the best sweet spot for the type of plan we're receiving. Usually what I try to do philosophically is avoid as many deviation requests as we possibly can do, because those create scenarios where we may grant 5, 6, 7, 8 deviations and come to a parcel of property and that deviation combination didn't work well. And all of a sudden that developer's stuck having to come back and get the preliminary plan adjusted for that parcel. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a code, it's part of the way the code is written, but it's also part of the way of how do you implement, especially, I get that there's no development currently to the east, but we are really at that tail end, if you will, of the current development pattern. So this is kind of an infill development from that perspective, as far as staff looks at it.
Okay. And then the last question that I had, just kind of going back to a couple of the concerns that were raised by Mr. Sampson and then Maurice, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your last name. Whoever's driving the cursor, could you point to the, I believe they said it was 185th, where is the concerns with the water flow? And okay, so it's kind of in a north-south direction, they're right there on that. Okay, and again, what was it that you were going to do to try to, I mean, what are you going to do that's going to make things better for that particular concern?
Do you want to go to the utility plan?
Sure.
It's further down.
It'll have to load, it takes a second.
Note to self, I'll come with a PowerPoint next time. Well, we can just go back to the main screen that you were on. There's a whole storm sewer that's going to be built along that western side of our R1. That's where that ditch is now. That's causing problems. That's where a lot of drainage comes through there. So we're going to put in an enclosed storm sewer system meeting the city's standard specifications for storm sewers down through there. In fact, oh wait, stop. Well, there you see it right there in the on the left-hand side of the screen. It actually extends farther north. This is just a duplex area, but then you see the dash lines up above there at the top of the page. That same line continues on to the north and ties into storm sewer that's coming out of that subdivision to the north there, that phase of Aspen Creek, that just daylights the drainage from the developed part down into that existing swale or ditch, whatever you want to call it, that's unimproved, and that'll pick that up and carry that drainage along with some yard grading there to improve the drainage locally so that not only the runoff that comes from the north and all the other runoff, but the localized drainage will be improved as well with inlets, curb inlets, area inlets, and enclosed storm sewer down through that western side.
Can I ask, just for clarification, I want to make
Yes.
sure for the record, Mr. Clausen, you're talking about an underground stormwater system on that west side, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Commissioner McNear.
I had just a couple questions, just to make sure that I understand. Where we're at. I just want to make sure that, David, I think this is for you, make sure that I understand the intent here with an RP. If the developer or makes any changes to the intended use or intensity of this development, that they're gonna have to come back before us again, and that this was, that this going to an R4 was primarily for keep the number of deviations down in the size of the lots. Is my understanding of that correct?
That is correct. What I will add to that, just so everybody is aware, there are certain parameters when they come back to you for the final plan, because after preliminary, if it is approved, they have a final plan step, which adds details to the plan beyond what you're seeing tonight. They have to remain consistent with that approved preliminary plan. They are allowed, because of further study on stormwater, traffic, other things, they would be allowed to maybe bring to you some minor changes. If you remember from our last plan commission meeting, there are some of those areas where we've said, oh, you can get like a 5% adjustment. That really has to do with things like the design elements. When they come back, we do have a set of criteria parameters get further into their study, if it's within those tolerances, they can come forward to you with that as a final plan.
But,
If they're outside of that tolerance, they'd have to come back to a revised preliminary plan stage here tonight and go through this process again.
So just to be sure, they would not be allowed to go to triplexes or
That's-
fourplexes?
that's
or
correct.
quadplexes Or anything else that would increase the density? Is that
That's correct. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because somebody did mention the idea of 4 to 6 plexes. I think that was kind of mentioned in the presentation. This proposal does not incorporate any 4 to 6 plexes, does not, in your approval of the preliminary plan, I should say recommended approval if that's what you choose, does not include 4 plexes or 6 plexes.
Okay, couple more areas, if I could. I just want to make sure that I understand, there's a number of duplexes in the community today. Are what we're talking about here largely similar to what's in place today? I just want to make sure that for clarification, my understanding is correct.
I believe they would be similar to what's there to the west. They're different design with different materials, but they're similar to what's to the west. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest part of it is being a two-car garage type duplex, which you go to a lot of communities and single car is, pretty prevalent. And we just don't want to do that, not for the price point that Greg's asking to provide here.
These are largely for rental, is that correct?
Yes, they are.
And average rent is going to be in what range?
$1,600 to $1,800 a month.
Just a couple more questions, and then I'll be done. At some point, this is to our chairman and staff both. It seems like we need to probably figure out some way to come back to the driveway percentages. That we keep running into this very same issue time after time after time after time, and have to grant variances. And as my understanding, this is largely for marketability and being able to build something that the public will accept. I mean, if it only had a single car garage, I guess this is to the developer. If it only had a single car garage, that could seriously impact the rents and drive it into a much lower price point. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was one of the reasons we're asking for the variance. We want to do the two-car garages. And, the numbers that you see on that deviation request as far as percentage of driveway width being a percentage of the overall width of the lot, a lot of that gets driven by those cul-de-sacs because your lot kind of narrows down right there at the right-of-way where your street is turning. So that is the absolute minimum part of the lot. And that's where we're seeing some of the higher numbers exceeding on our percentages. But then after that, it starts to open back up in a pie shape because that's typically a cul-de-sac lot. So you still get the green space off beyond that, but we're required to measure that street frontage along that right-of-way. And it's really even impossible to do when you look at single-car garages. So it's difficult to make duplex type zoning work within the duplex requirements, quite frankly.
I guess to our chairman, I'd like to see it. Do you think it would be worth taking time to try to revise some of these standards to allow a wider driveway?
Oh, I can talk to the city about adding it to a future discussion.
I'd like to see that happen, just so we don't have to keep coming back to variances and deviations time after time.
And I'll make sure for the record, everybody understands we're talking deviations. Okay, just for folks here, because variances are very different.
Right.
That would be before the BZA, it has a whole different meaning. So that's why I want to clarify that for people listening at home as well as folks in the audience. We're talking about deviations that are allowed as part of the plan process because you're looking at the overall development, okay, as part of this. So I will tell you that staff has a number of items that as we've been having discussions and different proposals coming in, we do see some problematic areas where these design numbers aren't necessarily meshing, that they need some tweaking. So we do have a list going, and the way we would be approaching that would be outside of any particular case and likely through a workshop session first with you all to talk about it and then go from there. So
Sorry for the impreciseness of deviation.
that's fine. I get a little bit jumpy because of the people that are in the audience and that those technical terms, if they get interchanged, is not a good thing.
familiar with that. But the thing that jumped out to me the most was when Gary spoke about the outer road in that open space. Is there something that we can do to address that? I'm not comfortable with, especially we've had so many people speak of the traffic issues that they're having currently. Now we're adding another subdivision. We're adding more homes, more traffic, and then on top of that, Mauricio already talked about the fact that he's having youth traffic now, and we don't have these homes. So what can we do to mitigate open space to where we don't have to worry about young people or children, especially playing on the parkway and running into that outer road? Like, is there something that you can do to help with that distance between the green space and the road? Fencing, trees.
And I don't know if you can
I don't know
put
if
up the
that's-
plan, but
I'll try. Bob, you may want to chime in on this also. So the quote-unquote outer road that I think we're talking about would be something that's paralleling I-35 at some point in the future if there was a connection made to the parcel to the east from the south, kind of southwest area, if you will, a road that comes up from that commercial area south of this development. So you can kind of see, yes, Bob's showing it now. I'm assuming you're most concerned about this area that's between the interstate, kind of the corner of the development there. The unfortunate part, well, there's two things that could potentially happen, but we'd have to look into it. We could certainly talk about it as part of maybe a consideration for the final development plan. One is we don't know what the road design is, and we don't know yet if that road will ever come to fruition. So that's one thing we want to be careful of. The second part is we are dealing with a utility easement, which will have stipulations as to what you can do with landscape buffering, structures, different things going on in that area. So, you know, the idea of putting up what I would call a traditional screen, landscape screen in that, would be limited as to the type of materials they can use because they don't want the height of tall trees and shade trees getting into that because that creates trimming issues, especially on an item like this. So, that's a little bit difficult now. Again, we don't really know how that property to the east is going to develop at this point. We have a little bit of an idea what's going to happen to the south because about a year or two ago, before I got here, Plaza South was actually proposed. So Plaza South, as you know, is down south of this property, and of course, then there's some vacant commercially zoned area between Plaza South development and this location where these come together. So, you know, knowing that it is likely to continue to go commercial that area, what we would look at is a development pattern that commercial developer would be required to have a buffer as part of it because they would be against residential zone. Correct, Bob? So that.
So we could make that stipulation for future development that there's a buffer.
Right, the responsibility would be the more intense use develops the buffer. Okay, so that screen that would be kind of the south side of this, we would look at that whenever that is proposed commercial, sit there and say, okay, how are we blocking the commercial from that residential zone? There's distance requirements, landscaping requirements, things like that.
I might also add, you can kind of see on your screen here, there's actually a tree row of mature trees along that south property line now. And that even extends farther west over, you can see it on the lower left part of your screen there. Those trees are all remaining. And that, you know, there's really nothing better as far as screening and trying to separate uses than existing trees. We have no intention of taking any of those down. Obviously subject to anything the power company tells us, but certainly not part of our development plan to take any of those things down.
And that tree line that Judd is talking about was actually part of to remain when the Plaza South development came through this before you guys as well. The other thing that I believe Judd had mentioned earlier was that, and we require, is that a level 2 buffer be and between between the duplex development and the single family to the north as well.
The other thing that I'm concerned about is many people mentioned traffic. I think Gina already said she can't make a left at 187th Street right now.
186.
I'm sorry, 186?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. What can we do to help? I know that we require traffic impact study before final approval. So I'm just wondering, do you have any ideas other than, I know you have the calming, feature with the cul-de-sac or going through 186th Street? What else are you willing to do more if we find out that more is needed to mitigate traffic?
And certainly that's something we'll take a look at, and I think that's on the stipulations as far as the stormwater and the traffic. We've already submitted both narratives to the city engineer, both reports. They've reviewed it, we've addressed comments. If there's some additional things that we need to look at, we can certainly do that, but you're taking, we're taking that as a stipulation to be willing to continue to work on those items as the community, needs us to.
Dave, I think this is one for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a clarification though too, because I wanna make sure, the traffic issue we're talking about at 186 left turns, are we talking about at Gardner Road, or are we talking, what? Okay.
At Gardner Road.
Okay, so part of the traffic study work is to look at the impacts of this development moving in and out of the area, okay? What their requirements may be to make those improvements may not fall on this developer, because being on a Gardner Road and that arterial, what it may trigger is that the city needs to make an improvement to that intersection. So it's not just about the developer doing this, it's a matter of understanding and assessing that additional traffic plus the problem that may be out there today, and then if the city is willing to make those improvements, or if those improvements are warranted.
Sure, and that's what you can see on 183rd is just exactly that type of traffic impact where this whole area has had as to why they actually provide a lit intersection up there. So if for some reason on 186 out onto Gardner Road, if the Public Works Department determined that a light was warranted at that intersection, then they would put it in.
One thing I'd also like to add too is I believe Gardner Road's an arterial, and we're paying 33 acres of excise tax too, which goes to the city for improvements to arterial streets. So it's really something that this city and other cities in Johnson County have implemented to solve and have developers contribute to those improvements that are kind of outside the immediate area of their development.
And I do want to clarify, every development such as this, when they get through their final plat stage, okay, and they're getting ready to file and record that document, they have to pay their excise tax at that time. So when they go through the final plat process is when then the excise tax, park impact fees, those kinds of things are collected. Well, park impact fee, I take that back, that's at building permit stage. But excise tax is at the plat stage. So when that comes in for approval or signature as part of the signature process, that's when we collect those
That is correct. There's one less single-family lot to the north. There's two more duplex lots on this plan, so a delta of one additional lot.
So what we're talking about here is nothing that's really substantially different in scope than when this neighborhood was first platted out at the very beginning,
That's
12 years ago.
That's correct.
I do want to clarify that because it was one of my notes that I wanted to note here. Understand that what has been shown as exhibits and talked about here was at preliminary stages. This area has never had a final plat filed for it. So this 33 acres, there was never a final plat actually filed and recorded at the county for this 33 acres. There was preliminary plans, there were discussions around those, things like that. But as far as the final platting, if you go to Johnson County Ames, you'll see there is no plat for this area, for this segment.
I'm just wanting to make sure that I'm clear that we're really not significantly expanding the scope of what the development was originally designed to do.
That's correct. And when Greg and I first started talking with the city and with the seller who sold Greg the land, we just wanted to finish out really kind of what was there. Of course, now we know that it's almost 20 years later, and we're trying to figure out how what was originally planned there fits with the current development code, and that's what a lot of conversation is about tonight. But we're just trying to finish what's already there.
A lot of the concern about traffic on Gardner Road in and out of the main entrance of the subdivision, we really aren't talking about something that's a substantial difference from where it was originally planned for that capacity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The other area that I had, just wanted, as I'm looking at this, it just seems to make sense. Now, as we're looking to this area, off to the be the right, I think it's the south of the or east of the subdivision here. These two streets that are stubbed out. That's this next area is largely commercial. It's going to be commercial. Is that correct?
Well, it is zoned commercial today, yes, and in the comprehensive plan, it is shown as commercial also.
So,
go ahead.
When you have a stub between lots 215 and 216 for the single family and 116 and 117 for the multifamily, are we looking at something that could potentially go off, do a commercial development on out to Gardner Road and relieve some traffic congestion in the subdivision? Is that kind of the thought process?
Well, typically we're trying to always connect development to develop the next layer of development. When you have this meshing, if you will, of the commercial and the residential like this, you want to have sensitivity that you're trying not to bring commercial traffic into residential.
Right. No, I'm saying this, the commercial, the connections to the commercial development, future commercial development, it looks like that could provide some relief potentially to the congestion in the subdivision getting in and out.
It potentially could if there was ever an outer road that you were connecting one of these two. That way people wouldn't necessarily have to use Gardner Road. They'd have another outlet to get onto to go. That's possible. But again, we're talking about trying to limit commercial and residential interaction, if you will.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
Commercial Mater?
Just one clarifying point. I wasn't for sure when to ask this because we were on the rezoning. We were talking about the plan. So
all over.
I just
We'll
figured,
do it
all
all.
right, I'll ask a question.
That's why we did the public hearing and everything is consolidated. Go ahead.
A little out of practice. Okay. What's level 2 landscape buffering? I looked and
We're gonna let Bob look that one up.
that was a new one for me. I looked and
There are different, what I know at this stage, since I've been here all of 5.5 months, we have different intensities of different buffers depending on the land uses that are just matching together. So I'm sure Bob is going to find for us a technical reference so that we have that, especially since he wrote that part.
sweet. Thank you.
We'll look that up for you.
Thank you.
While he looks that up, I'll go ahead and make my comments and have my questions. One of the items that was brought up was that the area that you're talking about for Trail and Frisbee Station and Emmett Garden basically has crawdads and so forth. So would the drainage you're talking about, fixing that, also fix water collecting in that area of the development?
Yes, we do intend to do some grading work down there to improve how the drainage is handled in that area. And you kind of see where Hammock Garden text is. There's an amoeba shape there. We've got actually a little storm drainage detention area there that we'll be using to improve the drainage before it's released further off to the south, meeting the city's stormwater ordinance requirements for water quantity as well as water quality.
They are required by code to retain their whatever stormwater increase that they're having that needs to stay on that parcel or on that property, if you will, overall. And I'm gonna just ask for a clarifying follow-up because I just wanna make sure, because that's in that utility easement, any grading and everything has to be approved by the appropriate utility companies, correct?
Yeah, anybody who has an easement in there would have to grant us those rights as well.
So they'd have to not only have your review and approval, but they'd have to also go to the utility easement, make sure all that's fits within their plans.
Okay, and then I was part of the Parks Master Plan in 2004, 2005. And speaking to Mr. Gary, he talked about that trails and Frisbee Golf Station basically doesn't meet the definition of a neighborhood park, if I listened to him correctly. So what's the response from the city on that?
So there's two things going, and Jason Bruce is here, our Parks Director, in case you have a direct question for him. I'll give it the overview try, the college try, and then we'll go from there. There's a couple things that I also had a note on here about public parks versus the open space requirement for private development. Understand the land that is being shown as that Tract A, that is intended to meet their open space requirement for the development. Okay, so it's not a public park in the true sense of being dedicated to the city and the city operating park space. Okay, this would be a open space that meets the open space requirement for the development and would fall under the ownership, if you will, of the HOA that's created with this process if it's approved. So understand that, which is not uncommon. The property to the east of this area, that's the green area that's shown here in the southern boundary, is under the ownership of the HOA of Aspen Creek, one of the original Aspen Creek HOAs there. So that is not dissimilar to what's happening there in the area. And there's a number of different parcels in this area that are also operated or owned and maintained by the HOAs, the equivalent HOAs. So that's part of it. As far as the Parks Master Plan and what is shown or not shown as public land, neighborhood park. The Parks Master Plan, one, does not show a trail going through this area as a public trail or greenway. I've heard a number of terms tonight, greenway, parkway, as we go through this. There is a Trails Master Plan that is part of the overall park system master plan. There is not a trail in that master plan for this area per se. The trail that kind of serves this area, because this is developed the way it is primarily along Gardner Road. It's not a greenway per se, it's not following a stream corridor, but it's following the arterial. So you notice on that side of Gardner that there's a trail in existence there. These sidewalks would connect into that trail. Okay, so that's one reason why we're requiring sidewalks as well as that connectivity. So that's part of it. When it comes to quote unquote neighborhood park, the master plan map that we utilized in our resources and in our analysis shows the potential for neighborhood parks, public parks in this area, but not within this 33 acres. There is one designated to the north up along 183rd Street, and I don't know, Bob, if this goes far enough north as an exhibit. Can we scroll up a little bit? So, stop right there. So you can see the area there that looks like it has the farm on it, and that, I think it was a chicken coop of some type or something there. The western portion of that, that was nice. The western portion of that in the Parks Master Plan is shown at some future potential time as a possible neighborhood park. Okay. Now a lot needs to happen for that. Obviously, land has to become available. The Parks Department has to be willing to want to do that or have the directive to go ahead and do that. So that is one location that is there. The second one that was shown as potential neighborhood park is just to the east of this, right along the boundary where some of these duplexes are. So there was an area also in the Parks Master Plan that's shown on that map as, again, I'm going to underscore this, potential neighborhood park to help accommodate whatever do those kinds of parks would be looking at the opportunity of land, the development that goes on there, how do we get that dedicated, and do we want to accept that land from the standpoint of the city park with the maintenance and everything that goes on, and that's an operational question that is given to our Parks Department to look at those things when those opportunities arise. Does that help?
Okay.
I had that note, that's why I went a little longer on this. I had that note about people using civic and open space and what's in the LDC versus in the master plan, and I just want to make sure we differentiate. There's two different types of open space going on here.
Right. Okay. Bob, did you find an answer for Commissioner Bader?
I can't remember the code. I'll get that to you tomorrow, but level 2 buffer is going from an R1 to different use categories, such as like so level 1 buffer zone would be like the transition area between an R1 and an R2. Level 2 would be like going from an R1 to like an R3, R4. And we actually have 4 different levels. So if there's a single family residential to a commercial, there would be even more intense. And it's basically the spacing of the trees and adding more shrubs.
Okay, and obviously.
I'll send that to you.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm just thinking back. I don't ever remember that, but that's okay. Yeah, if you could.
It's in here. Trust me.
I looked, Bob.
Yeah.
But I trust you. Okay, yeah. If you could provide that information, that'd be great.
Okay, and Bob, on in Plaza South, where's New Life in relationship? Is it by this park or is it farther to the west?
It is,
New
I
Life
believe, a little bit to the west of here.
It's down there where the PEI logo is. Isn't that?
Yes.
So it's right
just
in
to the
there.
west of there.
It's the
Just to the
commercial
west of
part
there.
of Plaza South is even farther west than
Yes.
here. You have a large church going into that spot right there.
And that whole area of Plaza South is a commercial.
Right. I wanted to point out that that back part was a church too. And then another question I think got answered for not Mr. Sampson, but Sampson. Sorry, I don't have your last name again. Asked about relative square footage for the single family homes. I'm assuming because the lots are basically the same size that the square footage is roughly the same as the rest of the already developed area.
Yes, that's the intention.
And I will add to that. So the single-family area is not subject to any size requirement for the building itself. They would have to fit into the building envelope set by the setbacks around the perimeter of the property. So square footages of whatever size could go in there to fit that.
Right, I was getting a rough idea due to the question. Okay, yeah, for traffic, I've been out in that area. I have a friend that used to live off 185th and Cherry. 186th Street, because it is a collector out to our arterial, is wider than like Cherry or some of the other streets there. It's wider because it's supposed to be a collector to take people to Gardner Road. It was designed that way because they knew not only what's there is going to be going down that to go out to Gardner Road or Center Street, but obviously they had a plan at some point that fell through to do exactly what this developer is looking to do. I go back to what the city said before. They could have come in with a whole bunch of deviations and put all this in without going through the zoning or a lot of what we're going through now. Because it was already out there, it's already zoned R2. So they're not doing anything different than what was already supposed to go in there. And so I don't see any issue with the actual development part of it or the traffic part of it, unless the city has an issue with the traffic part of it. Water standing around all over out there, so obviously that was a concern with the storm drains. Saw lots of water in all the dead ends, except for Canton. And then, so my only big question was the parks part, and so I've got that clarified. So that's all I have.
And Mr. Chairman, if you wish to call up Mr. Bruce, you certainly can from the Parks Department to clarify anything that I was representing, or he may want to clarify something too, I don't know.
He's free to come up if he'd like. I don't have anything unless anybody else wants to speak. Bob?
Yeah, I found it, Adrian. Sorry about that.
Good.
It's actually, in Chapter 8 of the code, and it's Table 8.2, buffer planning requirements. So take a look at basically 17.08.030, Table 8.2.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, have any other questions, comments that you'd like to make? All right, let's see, come up for.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I missed what you were saying there. I'm assuming you're prepared
done
to
with our
move
discussion.
forward with each of the itemized items, okay. So, go on up. As we mentioned before, there are 5 different action items here that you are to consider. I want to make sure everybody understands at this point in the process, everything is a recommendation to the city council. So whatever your recommendation motion is that you vote upon, that motion along with the record of this meeting and the materials that have been provided get forwarded onto the city council. They are the ones that actually make the decision as to whether to approve, deny, approve with conditions, so on and so forth. I will suggest, Mr. Chairman, at the end of this part of the session, maybe talk about, or I will talk to, the dates and timeframes that are involved, because we have a number of people in the audience, and that way they'll understand where the process goes from here.
I'll try not to be as long-winded as I was earlier. So, items 1A and 1B, we're going to hear those together. It is the Meadows of Aspen Creek 2, and this is for the rezoning petition and the preliminary development plan. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning and associated preliminary development plan with the conditions outlined below. Do you want me to read those?
Need to.
Okay.
Okay, there's no further discussion on this. I'd accept a motion.
After review of application C-21-01, rezoning of 15.59 acres located at the terminus of 186th Street, approximately 2,000 feet east of Gardner Road, parcel ID CF 221436-1005, from R2 two-family residential district to RP4 planned mixed density neighborhood district
1C, Meadows of Aspen Creek 2, and this is for the preliminary plat. Staff recommends approval of the preliminary plat with the conditions outlined below.
Okay, any discussion? I'd accept the motion on this item.
After review of case number PP-21-01, a preliminary plat for the Meadows of Aspen Creek 2, parcel ID CF221436-1005, located at the terminus of 186th Street, approximately 2,000 feet east of Gardner Road. The staff report dated March 22nd, 2021, and a preliminary plat dated February 1st, 2021. The Planning Commission approves the application as proposed, provided the following conditions are met. 1, approval of a stormwater management plan and traffic impact study by the Public Works Department.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Commissioner Ford and a second by Commissioner McNear. Any further discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Item D.
Item D, Aspen Creek 5, rezoning petition, request to rezone from R2, two-family residential district, to R1, single-family residential. Staff recommends approval of the proposed rezoning as outlined in the motion below.
All right, any discussion on this item? All right, accept the motion.
After review of application Z-20-09, a rezoning for 0.12 acres located approximately 450 feet from the terminus of 185th Street from R2 district to R1 district, and staff report dated March 22nd, 2021. The Planning Commission recommends the governing body approve this application.
Have a second?
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner McNear and a second from Commissioner Ford. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. Item number E.
Item 1E, Aspen Creek 5, preliminary plat. Staff recommends approval of the proposed preliminary plat as outlined in the motions below.
Okay, any further discussion on this? All right, accept the motion.
After review of case PP-20-12, a preliminary plat for Aspen Creek 5, tax ID CF221436-1005, located at the terminus of Canton Street, approximately 525 feet south of 183rd Street, and preliminary plat dated December 4th, and staff report dated March 22nd, 2021. The Planning Commission approves the application as proposed, provided the following conditions are met. 1, approval of a stormwater management plan and traffic impact study by the Public Works Department.
Yeah, second. Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Hanson and a second by Commissioner McNear. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any against? Any abstentions? Motion passes 6-0. All right, Dave.
Just the housekeeping items so that everybody is aware. These items will go to the City Council on Monday, April 19th, 2021. They'll be heard at 7 p.m. by the City Council at that time. The reason this is delayed to that period is obviously after the rezoning cases, there's a procedure for potential protest by the property owners who live within 200 feet of the rezoning areas. So if there are people out there that are either listening to this or are here in the audience tonight that are within that 200-foot notification ring, they would have gotten a letter, a specific letter addressed to them at that property, and they're interested in understanding that protest period, staff would be glad to talk with them about what that entails and when they would have to get
second by Commissioner Ford to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.